Good afternoon, and welcome to the Atlanta, Georgia, remotely. I think this is a phenomenal technology, and I appreciate all of you out there with me and spending the next hour with me to talk about training. My name is Sean Kaufman. I'm the Director of Training Programs at Emory University, also the President and Co-Founder of Behavioral-Based Improvement Solutions, which really is a business designed to deliver behavioral-based training programs for individuals who work in laboratory environments, primarily high-containment laboratory environments. For the last 10 years, I've been involved in several types of programs, teaching folks to work safely in lab environments. And one of the most important audiences that I can think of are the laboratory animal science folks. Because as you compare them with typical scientists who may find themselves working at biosafety cabinets or just with a little bit of a particular pathogen, laboratory animal science folks are working with animals. And these animals are unpredictable and could be shedding a lot of the pathogens that we're working with. And typically what we see is these animal care staff and the laboratory animal folks are some of the most unprepared individuals for working in a laboratory environment. So again, I want to thank all of you for the opportunity to share some of my ideas and strategies and thoughts on how you can implement safe and effective training, and I hope that this program is beneficial. I know that some of you may have questions, and what I'd like to do is I'd like for you to feel free to enter those questions at any time. So please, if you have any questions at any time, enter them. But what we're going to do is we're going to wait till the very end to actually answer them. So I don't want you to forget your questions. So if you have it, go ahead and type it in and send it, and then what we'll do at the end is we'll see if we can address the questions moving forward. So again, thank you, and I'd like to go ahead and get started because I can talk all day about training, and the reality is I only have an hour with you guys at this point. One of the things I'd like to start out with specifically to this program is really defining what training is, and really in essence what it isn't. A lot of folks like to use the word training kind of synonymously with a lot of other things. So for example, if I go into a classroom and I sit and watch a PowerPoint, people will call that training. You have the bloodborne pathogen training, which is something that folks have to work or go through almost on an annual basis with OSHA, and they have to sit and watch the same slides over and over again. If you're sitting on your butt and you're watching slides and you're actually listening to a presentation that's going to increase your overall awareness, very similar to what I'm doing today, that is not a training program. That actually is an awareness building program. So when I talk about training today, I'm not going to be talking about programs that build awareness. I'm going to be talking about programs that actually focus on Okay, I'm on the phone. Looks like I apologize for dropping off. I don't know what has happened here. Tracy, you want to help me? Am I back online? Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so I apologize, folks. So if I'm not able to teach someone how to swim with PowerPoint, then in essence it's not training. If we were to take, for example, a child, put them in front of a PowerPoint and teach them how to swim with a PowerPoint and then throw them in a swimming pool, our training program would be labeled as very ineffective and probably not very conducive for teaching folks how to swim. The other thing that I'd like to talk about is this aspect of an expert type training, so what we call education. And so if I am a swimmer and I've already been swimming for quite some time, and we're going to review a video of my technique and try to tweak certain things that I do, that is really an education aspect based on my experience. So for this presentation, what we're going to be dealing with and what we're going to be talking about is training as building a skill. What type of skills do folks working in laboratories, especially with animals, need to acquire, and how do they need to acquire those to be safe with the work that they do? Another thing that I really want to focus on too is this sense of purpose of training. The worst thing you can ever do for a trainer is actually make a training program mandatory. And if I had polls out there, I'd probably ask you guys how many of you have been forced to come to this session today. That's the worst thing that you can actually make someone do, is to attend a training program, because if you're making someone come into a program to learn a skill and they're not wanting to learn that skill, then that puts a tremendous burden on the trainer. So if your purpose of training is to punish someone or to remain in compliance, that's another, I'm going to train folks so that I remain in compliance, and that's your sole purpose, then I would say that your training programs are actually starting off on a bad side and on a bad note, because the purpose of training really is an investment in an individual, not only in their professional aspects, but also their personal aspects, because they're learning skills that they can not only apply at the office, but they're also applying it at home as well. So when you look at training should be a process. It shouldn't be a one-time shot, rather a vaccine that's repeated as you go on. So the purpose of training is to invest in an individual, to increase skill, to fine-tune that skill, and really, in essence, to verify and make sure that someone is capable of working safely and doing what it is we're asking them to do in a laboratory environment. The next slide is kind of comical. I put my mugshot there, because no matter what you do with me, and especially if you take a look at a recipe card, and I would like to replace that as, look, if I'm an animal care staff worker, or if I'm working with animals in the laboratory environment, and you give me a set of SOPs, and in this case, as the example, it's really in essence a book of recipes, which are standard operating procedures, which I like to call standard operating behaviors. No matter what you do, if you don't mentor me, if you don't invest in any kind of training with me, you will never make me as good as the chef is. So just because you give me a book of Martha Stewart recipes does not and will not ever make me Martha Stewart. It simply won't work. And if I were to give all of you a recipe card from Martha Stewart and have you cook the same thing off that recipe card, we would have inconsistent outcomes, meaning all of you would bring back something that looked different, tasted different, smelled different, and even though it was the same exact recipe, the outcomes would be variable. And that's something in a laboratory environment that we cannot afford to have. So the reality is when you look at behavioral-based training, or you look at any type of training program, you're really trying to minimize variety in the overall outcome. And minimizing that variety means that you will achieve safety, because it's in the variable outcomes, the varied operating procedures, that accidents and incidents happen, and that preventable issues can actually be stopped or minimized. If you look at the philosophy that I've used over the last 10 years in training, we use a concept called plans plus behaviors equals outcomes. Now, I think it's inherent that no one wakes up in the morning, whether they are a scientist or a laboratory animal care technician, or anybody for that matter, that wakes up in the morning and says, I think today is going to be my last day at work, and I'm going to go to work and do something stupid which is going to end up killing me or other people. I don't think that. So I think the general outcome is fairly consistent. We all want to go to work. We want to be safe at work, and we want to make sure that what we do at work stays at work and it does not come home with us. I think that's inherent. I think to assume otherwise is insulting at times to folks who work in a laboratory environment. But here's the issue that I have. So many folks think that a written plan is going to produce that safe outcome. That if I can just write a plan, give that person a plan, have them sign that plan, so they're signing the plan, and then let them go work, we have a problem. That does not produce consistent outcomes, and in fact, it doesn't even verify that the individual is capable of working safely in a laboratory environment. In order for us to bridge plans and outcomes, in order for us to ensure that a plan does produce the outcome we're looking for, we have several things that we have to do. The first thing we've got to do is take a look at the plan. So many plans today are written in one language, and there are so many people who work in the lab that come from a variety of different countries and who speak different languages. If the SOPs that are written for that laboratory environment are not written in a language that everybody understands, then we've got a problem. The next problem is when we use jargon words. So for example, if I want someone to don or doff, equivalently in cooking, I may ask somebody to whip or beat an egg, or even in essence coddle an egg. These things are culinary terms, and unless you have experience in the cook industry, you probably may not be able to differentiate whipping and beating and coddling an egg. Just like if you don't have much experience in the lab industry, donning and doffing may be terms that you are unfamiliar with, and you then therefore cannot follow the SOP because the terminology is not very clear. Last but not least, and this is an interesting exercise, if you have a piece of paper in front of you, I'd like for you to follow a quick and brief SOP. And that SOP is, I'd like for you to fold that piece of paper in half 8 times. And what you will find if you go ahead and try and fold that piece of paper in half 8 times, as proven on Mythbusters, by the way, that the only number that you can fold is 7 times, no matter how big this sheet of paper is. So even though the reality is you cannot fold a piece of paper 8 times, it doesn't mean that I can't write that as an SOP. And so a lot of SOPs are actually written in a manner that makes it physically impossible for people to follow. So when we take a look at our SOPs, we first have to take a look at, well, are the plans understandable language-wise, understandable from a jargon aspect, and also actually physically possible. If we have plans that are that way, we then move to the next level, which is really looking at validity and making sure that what the author is saying is actually what is demonstrated by the person reading those words. So for example, if I say put your hand over your head, and then I look around the room and there's inconsistencies, because there would be. Some would raise their left, some would raise their right, some would have their hands up in the air, some would have their hands over their head. The reality is that until I give those words that produce ultimate consistency around all the people in the room, my SOP is not validated. Okay? So plans can't just be written and then handed to someone and say, go do it. Typically, the author of the SOP takes it very personal when SOPs are not being followed, when in reality, typically, if SOPs aren't being followed and it is solely an SOP issue, it's typically the SOP that needs to be changed and not the individual. If you look at behavior, I want you to imagine someone walking down the street, and as they walk down the street, they fall into a pit. And in this pit is about 10 feet of water, and there's no way out. And there's a great white shark swimming in that water. Of course, the person who falls in that pit would panic a little bit. Once they gathered themselves, they would actually scream for help. Now, if I came over and looked down in that pit and I said, that looks like a pretty big risk down there, the individual would typically look at you and say, well, no duh, can you please help me? And I would say, well, it would be a great benefit if you got out of that pit. And the person would then say, yeah, please help me. Now, if at that point I chose to walk away and I didn't see that person until a week later and they had lost their arm as a result of that shark attack, they probably would not have very nice things to say to me. They'd probably beat me with the other arm that they have. But the reality is this. Most trainings out there do just that. They discuss risk and benefit, and that's the awareness aspect. That's what you can do during PowerPoint. You know, that shark is a big risk. It would be of great benefit if you got away from the shark. Most of those awareness training programs are things that are common sense, like, you know, hey, we have a risk in the lab, and it would be a benefit if you followed the SOP. It's when you get to the third one, which is skills. And that's like me throwing a rope down to the person in the pit, but not holding onto the other end of it. Giving someone a biosafety cabinet or animal cages or any type of equipment without any type of training is like throwing a rope and not holding the end of it. It's useless. You might as well whip the shark with it. And then if you look at the skills, after that you look at the skills. So that's the resources. If you look at skills, you basically have to give somebody time to practice that SOP until they feel comfortable and they feel like that SOP is actually beneficial. So when you look at behaviors, you have to have 5 things to ensure an SOP or a sustained behavior occurs. The first, people have to understand the risk they face. The second, they have to understand the benefit. The third, they have to have the resources to follow the SOP. The fourth, they have to have the skills. And last but not least, they have to have the belief in themselves that they can not only follow the SOP, but that the SOP actually makes a difference. When you look at your overall outcome, it should be measurable in time and overall outcome. But when we talk about plans plus behaviors equals outcomes, the reality of it is training is absolutely critical because it is the bridge between the plan and the outcome. And if we don't have effective training programs, then our outcomes are at risk. And that's the key point with this slide. Now, many of you out there probably run your training programs. I know there's a lot of folks that are very experienced in training. I will openly and candidly say that, look, all trainers are people, but not all people are trainers. The reality is this. Many of you have tried several types of training programs and are not getting the results that you want. And so if that's the case, I love to turn to Albert Einstein, who says, look, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. The difference between a lesson learned and a lesson ignored is change. And I can feel for those folks who are out there that have a million things to do and training has been thrown on them as an additional responsibility. That puts you in a very, very bad place. And I would argue that there are some phenomenal training options out there where you can engage a third party who can customize your training solutions and actually deliver a very engaging, up-to-date training program for you and your organization. I would challenge you to look for those organizations. But the reality is this: if training is the last thing on your priority list and you're a trainer, that's going to be tough, because let me tell you, if it's the last thing on your list, when you go to deliver it, it'll probably be the last thing on the people who are receiving its list as well. It's kind of one of those things where if you were bored giving a training program, the people in the audience are going to be bored receiving it as well. So if you are not seeing the results that you want, then it is time for you to make a change. And let's take a look at what some of those things that you can actually do as a result of changing your training program. The first thing that I want to talk about is behavior being kind of a two-edged sword, and this is again a very important component for training. Training kind of helps us maintain that balance. If you are someone who behaves, so let's say you're someone who changes animal cages on a daily basis, or you're doing necropsies on a daily basis, or you're doing animal care and husbandry on a daily basis. Let's say that you're someone who does something at a high frequency. Well, you are at a risk, a very, very big risk of becoming very, very complacent in what it is that you're doing. And not only complacent, and I'm not going to say arrogant, but I am going to say stubborn, meaning you develop a habit and a ritual that you like to use, and anybody who comes in with something different or an observation that may be a critique, you can become a little defensive. Training is something that will continuously challenge individuals and challenge complacency by giving them something new, something they're not thinking about, something out of the ordinary, and also possibly teaching new ways of doing things that folks are doing on a day-to-day and daily basis. That is a serious risk. Complacency is a serious risk. I want you to think about the first day that you ever did what it is you do today. The very first day, you had a great attitude because you really wanted to demonstrate your skills and capabilities. You were paying attention to everything around you. Your eyes were wide open. There was probably a little bit of an adrenaline rush. You were learning something new. And as time has gone by, you've gotten bored maybe. You're doing it over and over again. You wish that there were other things that you could be doing. And so you stop paying attention to those details that inevitably will one day get you. And could potentially put you at risk for an infection. If you look at the other side, so that's overbehaving, but if you look at the other side where you're underbehaving, then we run the risk of not being prepared to do the job that you need to do. And it also, your recall capabilities. So say, for example, you average 1 spill per year, or maybe 2 or 3. The point is those aren't high frequency events. And if you're not trained on an annual basis, you may forget how to, say, evacuate a laboratory during an emergency response, or catch an animal that has escaped, or maybe a spill that has occurred on the ground, or a cut that occurs as a result of necropsy. If you're not trained annually, then your capability to respond to those situations will be minimized. And so when you look at training and the benefit of training, you've really got to make sure that training not only attacks complacency and the sense of falling into a routine that cannot be changed, but it also addresses issues of low frequency events, so that when you find yourself in these situations, an annual training program will remind folks of what to do in these low frequency type situations. Okay. Another thing that trainers must become aware of is this concept of behavioral evolution. And what do I mean by that? If you look at this, it's the cycle. And if you're behavioral based, meaning if you're interested in learning about behavioral based training aspects, get ready. This is going to kind of talk to you a little bit about those. If you look at the far left, you'll see this increased awareness. That's a level of green. That's kind of where we want people to be. That's the first time you ever got on a bike, for example, or the first time you ever drove a car. Your hands were at 10 and 2, your eyes were wide open, you were paying attention to everything around you. The music even was a distractor, okay? When you're practicing a new behavior, you have an increased level of awareness, which is where we want you to be at all times. But unfortunately, as you continue to do that behavior, so as you drove more on that bike or on that car, you began to play your music, answer text messages, voicemails. You began doing things other than driving because you got comfortable. And that's where we call this perceived mastery. You believed, I have the behavior down. So this may be when you're changing cages or you're doing certain animal husbandry aspects, you're not paying attention to details because you've got this behavior down and you're in what we call a ritual, a habit. The problem with that is you're now at a decreased attention level to the details, and you're at risk for an incident or an accident. And sooner or later, that incident or accident is going to happen. Now, it may not happen to you. This is the cool part. You know, we can live vicariously through people. So if it happens to somebody and we hear about it, we can learn from it, and as a result, make sure that we prevent it from happening within our own organizations. But if you don't learn from someone else, then the accident or incident happens. And that's where we're in this red area. Now, the range of consequence for a laboratory accident is quite serious. You could have a near miss. You could have an incident that causes little to no damage. You could have an incident or accident that causes a serious injury. And you can have an incident or accident that causes an injury that either kills you or even hurts someone else. The reality is that the range of consequence is huge. So when you look at where we would intervene first as a trainer, we would intervene right after some new folks start working and they've worked for about 3 to 4 months. Man, I would inundate them with training, and I would put challenges in front of them that would challenge their confidence and make sure that they understand that it's not, you know, their routine is a great routine for them, but they have to continue to pay attention to detail. So right at the mark between perceived mastery and the incident, you're going to want to inject some type of behavioral-based training. Now, after an incident, as Friedrich Nietzsche says, look, if it doesn't kill you, it'll make you stronger. You make mistakes because you learn from them. You change. Hopefully you do. And as a result of this change, you go to an increased level of awareness yet again. But this time, because of all your experience, you're at a new level of mastery. So you're not where you were when you first started the behavior. You're actually in an increased awareness state after mastering the behavior for quite some time. It's right here between this mastery and complacency that the second round of training should occur, meaning folks who have been doing this job for years, 5, 6, 7 years, this is about the time when the next major accident begins to happen to them, and that's as a result of complacency. Once they become complacent again, they go back into the incident near miss, and the cycle continues its infinity. And this is kind of how we as individuals grow and learn through life. This concept of behavioral evolution gives us an idea as trainers in understanding what training can be used for, not only to make sure that people are doing what it is they're supposed to be doing when they set out early in their careers, but when folks become complacent later in their careers, it battles complacency as well. The next slide is I have to give Prochaska the credit for this. He talks about how people learn, and as trainers, it's very, very important that we set our learners up in actuality to learn. And so, what do I mean by that? Most people that come to a training program, and I'd say there are several folks out there listening to me right now. Some of you may be sleeping or doing whatever, but some of you are listening. Most folks that come to a training, unfortunately, don't come to learn. I wish that when I looked out into the eyes of the audience and all the classes that I've ever taught, I see a bunch of individuals who are just soaking up every single word I say. Those individuals are very few, small group of folks that actually operate that way, that actually come to a training program to really, truly learn. Majority of folks come to a training program to evaluate what the trainer is saying. You'll see it in the audience. Makes sense. Yes, I agree with that. No, I don't really agree with that. I don't. And they begin evaluating and taking a look at what the individual is saying, based on their own experiences and based on their own education levels. And that's okay. The third aspect you see is people who actually come to a training program to teach. So they use the training program to actually teach others, even though they're not necessarily the teacher or the trainer. What we want you to do as trainers is to prepare the learner. And what that means is, it's that whole thing, look, if you exalt yourself, you will be humbled, but if you humble yourself, you will be exalted. What we want folks to do as learners is we want to put them in a position where they realize that there is something to be learned in the class. So what I like to do is I like to give folks a test at the beginning of every class that I teach. I give them an exam. The exam has questions that, quite honestly, are almost impossible for them to answer, regardless of their level of experience. Because, again, that's what this training program is going to address. It's going to give them the answers to that test. But when they take that test initially, you see some type of event occur with them. They become disappointed in themselves. They realize that maybe there is something for them to learn. And the minute a learner realizes that, you're converting your class to more of a sponge-like class, meaning they are now seasoned to receive the information that you're about ready to give them. Meaning, don't ever have somebody come in and just assume they want to learn. The reality is we've got to start setting the stage for learning to occur. So if you look at this theory that Prochaska talks about, he basically states that when we talk about behavior, people will always believe in a greater percentage of, they can do something that they really can't. All of you out there who are wondering what I mean by this, just go out to your garage and take a look at bikes that you once bought, saying that I will, use this all the time, weight sets, fishing poles, kayaks, even gym memberships that you bought and you used once and don't use the rest of the year. What he calls this is unconscious incompetence, which means I believe I'm capable of doing something. I believe it with all my heart. And then when I go to do it and I learn that I can't, I become what I call conscious incompetent, meaning I am now aware of what it is that I don't know. So if I had a puzzle, some of you have seen the exercise that I do. I have an Elizabeth R. Griffin puzzle, and I have this puzzle, and I ask people, what's the likelihood that you'd put this puzzle together in 1 minute or less? If you're a man, typically you say 50%. If you're a woman, you say 30%. But after 1 minute of trying that, majority of folks will say 0%. That is a transfer from what we call unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. And that's a good start. So now someone is ready to learn. They know they can't do it, so now we're going to teach them. Okay, and they're listening. Now we teach them the SOP 3 times. The first time we have them watch what we do. The second time we have them tell us what we should do. And then the third time we have them demonstrate what we expect of them to do. And after that, we ask them on a scale of 0 to 100% what the likelihood is that they can do this SOP. Typically, after those 3 times, an individual will say 100%. And that's not a good answer. It's not a good answer because that individual has now believes that their success is determined on only their skill. And the reality is folks have to understand that it's not just about their skill, it's about the resources they have access to, the environments that they're working in, that there could be all sorts of fluctuations that are going to be determinants of their success. If the individual says, Sean, I could put this puzzle together 1 minute or less with that SOP, I then tell them to close their eyes. And once they close their eyes, they no longer can do it in 1 minute or less. And at that point, I have them open their eyes after they try, and I say, on a scale of 0 to 100%, 0 being unlikely, 100% being very likely, what's the likelihood that you'll be able to put this puzzle together in 1 minute or less? If they look at me and they say, Sean, will I have my eyes open? Will I have all the pieces of the puzzle in front of me? At that point, I now know that they've entered what we call conscious competence, which is they realize that it's not just about their skill, but it's about having everything they need to do what is expected of them. So I think that as trainers, we must prepare our learners. We can't assume that folks that come to us in a training class are there to learn. We have to, in essence, season them and prep them for the training program that we're about to deliver. Now, this is a picture of my family, and it's kind of a cool picture. I'm trying to see if I can use an arrow here. I believe I will. If you look up here at the top part here, what you're going to see is a bunch of novices. And what do I mean by novices? As trainers, we have to realize that not everybody who comes to our training program is at the same level. Of all of you out there, and there's quite a bit of you, I know that some of you are brand new trainers. Some of you are just getting started in your career. Some of you have been in your career for 10 to 15 years, and some of you have been in your career for 20, 25 years. The reality is that not all training programs should be designed for one particular audience. Novices are individuals that really, in essence, want to know why. And these are the awareness aspects. So if you can imagine your children, they want to know, why do I have to go to bed? Why do I have to take a shower? Why do I have to look both ways when I cross the street? A novice is always in the pursuit of understanding why things happen. Why am I doing what it is that I'm doing? Now, if you look at the next level here, the next level of groups are what we call practitioners. So these are the practitioners, the parents of the children. These parents and these practitioners are really, in essence, skill-based. They want to know how. How do I do this? How do I get my kid to take a shower every night? How do I get my child to stay seated in their chairs? How do I get my child? So they are looking at skill. Practitioners want skill, and they are looking for skill aspects and how to do a particular behavior. Now, one of the most neglected groups out there, and we see it in biosafety all the time because people say, well, I've just got this PI that is just so resistant to change. The reality is experts need training too. These experts are individuals who have a wealth of experience, and if they do not have training that teaches them to transfer that wealth of information without putting off practitioners or novices, if they don't have training to do that, then their lessons that they've learned may be lost and lost forever. So the reality is when you look at the audiences that you are addressing, remember that there are people that are looking for information specific to why. There are people looking for information specific to how, and then there are people looking for information specific to when and where do I plug this information in so that I don't lose the practitioners and the novices. Now, as a side note, I want to talk a little bit about this concept I have over here. This aspect I think is very, very important because novices have a tremendous amount of learning to do, and typically they learn through mentoring from practitioners, at least I hope they do. But I want to stress the fact that novices can teach practitioners a lot too. They can teach practitioners how to become better experts by teaching them communication skills and team building skills and patience and mentoring skills, all which are very, very needed at the expert level. And I continue on with the fact that experts have to have dialogue with practitioners, but practitioners can teach experts as well. So any expert out there that is still mouth pipetting, if you go to a practitioner, chances are they can teach you how not to mouth pipette, alternative behaviors. If you're smelling petri dishes or doing things in outdated ways, practitioners can help. But experts in turn can also help with the wealth of experience that they have. Last but not least, and I think very, very important, is this concept right here. Experts and novices must have dialogue. Novices today have a tremendous amount of technologic advantage. They have the capability of doing things that folks entering the workforce many years ago were not capable of doing. Experts can be mentored by novices, and that exchange of novice and expert is priceless. And just to put it in simple terms, look, there is no doubt that the children learn a tremendous amount from parents, but there's also no doubt that I as a parent have learned a tremendous amount from the children I raise. My dad and my mom have taught me a tremendous amount, and I know that I have taught them a tremendous amount too. This is post me being a child. I also know that in the summers that my kids spend with my mom and dad, their grandparents, that my mom and dad continue to learn a tremendous amount about themselves, even through their grandchildren. So if you use this sense of family in the laboratory environment and a sense of level of learners, you'll see that there are valuable lessons to be learned across all gamuts and all levels of learners. Okay? The next slide is one of my favorite mentors. I saw him do a presentation when I was going through school, and he was the reason why I wanted to become a teacher. But it was Jaime Escalante. Jaime Escalante was responsible for teaching those kids calculus out in Los Angeles, the kids that nobody believed in, the kids that everybody gave up on. And Jaime Escalante, during his talk many years ago, said to me, Sean, not me, but to the audience, and I took it personal here, but he said, look, students will always rise to the level of expectation. Don't be afraid of pushing them too hard. In fact, be afraid of not pushing them hard enough. And I will tell you that almost every training program I have ever constructed or built has always been designed to push people out of their comfort zone, to push them beyond what they think they can do, their capabilities. And the reality is that very, very, very rarely do people fail. In fact, they learn a lot more. And if you think about all the teachers that had the greatest impact on you, usually those teachers were not the ones that made you feel the most comfortable. They were the ones that showed you that you were much more than you thought you were. So Jaime Escalante reminds us as teachers and as trainers, look, if you're not uncomfortable learning new behavior, then something's wrong. The first time you got on that bike, as exciting as it was to see the bike in the garage, as exciting as it was to wait for a non-rainy day, the minute you sat on that bike and looked down that road and started to pedal, you were scared. Same goes with driving. You were scared. Any new behavior you're doing is going to cause some type of nervousness, and that's normal. And if you feel that in a training program, you know you're doing training because you're building skill. And that's important. Push people out of their comfort zone. Be there by their side. Mentor them so that they learn new skills and they learn what they need to be successful in the job that they're doing. Stop doing PowerPoint. Don't waste time. To give someone a PowerPoint presentation on how to ride a bike before they ride a bike is useless. Einstein said that. Einstein said education before experience is a waste. You're wasting time trying to teach somebody how to change cages with a PowerPoint, and just throw them in the lab with you. Have them watch how to change cages. Have them demonstrate with you how to change cages. And then if you want to show them a PowerPoint on changing cages, bring them back in the classroom to show them that. And that will allow them to fine-tune their behaviors. But don't start with PowerPoint. Get their hands dirty. Get them behaving right away. Let them start training immediately, and then focus on building that overall awareness. Now, one other issue in training is this concept that people are trained, and I can't stand that. I can't stand that. To me, that word is a cuss word. Trained means my investment in you is done. That's what trained means. And let me tell you when trained ends. Trained ends the moment the training program ceases. And what I mean by that is, if someone has passed a training program, the retention and the ability to recall all that is learned in the training begins to fade, and fade quickly. And we know this firsthand with what we've seen at Emory and with the courses that we've taught. I've had several repeat students who will take the courses many years later, and the retention is at a level that it once was when we first started working together. I would like trainers to look at themselves as someone like a dimmer switch, a repeated inject, meaning we are going to professionally and personally develop the individual on a frequent basis with small doses. We're not going to flick a switch and then flick it off. So trained, untrained, trained, untrained. No, rather we're going to develop an individual slowly. So it's almost 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but they never go back to where they were before as a result of that repeated inject aspect. So when we train folks, don't develop training programs where you say, I've trained and they're trained and we're done. Rather, develop programs that allow you to have repeated injects, repeated reminders, bite-sized pieces. You know, an apple tastes great in bite-sized pieces, but if you ram the whole apple down someone's throat, it doesn't taste like an apple at all. So give folks bite-sized pieces and be fun and creative. I mean, if you want to increase laboratory awareness, go into a lab and blindfold someone. Of course, you know they're not doing something risky, but blindfold them and say that they've got something in their eye and they've got to wash their eye out and find the sink and find the eye wash station. Let them wander blindfolded. Let them do it for 3 minutes. If they pass, great. If they don't, great. It's not about pass or fail. What it's about is the minute that blindfold comes off, their attention to detail in that laboratory environment will increase. They will pay attention to where things are and where the sink is and where the eye wash station is. And that profound impact from just a 3 to 4 minute intervention is far greater than the impact you would have 60 minutes in a PowerPoint presentation. So be creative and have fun and challenge people. Training is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be challenging. It's not supposed to be something that puts people to sleep. So consider that when delivering your training programs. Also, consider this. Don't use SOPs to train people. In fact, I'm going to challenge everyone out there to be SOP free when training. Look, SOPs are for regulators, folks. They're for the folks that want to know what you're doing in the lab. They're also performance indicators, meaning you're going to take an SOP and know exactly what you expect of your staff in that laboratory environment. And that is what an SOP is for. It is not designed to be for training. It is not designed to train an individual. It is designed, however, to verify that an individual has successfully completed a training. That is what an SOP can do. Meaning, if you take the SOP out, you look at it, and you watch the behavior that someone is doing, someone who has been through a training program, you're watching it, and their behavior matches that which is written on the SOP, the person has successfully completed the training. That is what an SOP is for. If you're giving people SOPs in training, it's like me giving the key to a test to a student in a class, and then when they take the test and pass, I say, look what they know. It's awesome. They're ready. They can do it. Giving someone the key to the test, giving someone an SOP to guide their behaviors and then say that they are verified and that they have been trained and that they are ready to work in a lab is cheating. Instead, take the SOP, ask them to demonstrate the behavior. If the behavior matches the SOP, they've been verified and are able to go work in the laboratory environment. Trainers must also make sure that you guys have the take your time, or not take your time, but that you understand how much time you have. One of the very first questions that I ask when folks say, Sean, can you develop a training program for us? I'll say, well, how much time do I have and how many people am I going to be training? That gives me an idea of what I can do. Unfortunately, majority of training programs out there today, if you look at it, you take 52 weeks and you divide it by 4 weeks off of vacation, 2 weeks on holidays, it gives us 46 weeks of work. 40 hours a week gives us about 1,800 hours. And if you look at training at 1%, it's roughly about 18 hours of training or about 2 days of training per year. And that right there, I'll be honest with you, is about industry standard. And that is well below what any industry who works, like, for example, airplane pilots, firefighters, police officers, military personnel, anyone who works in a risky situation that puts their lives at risk train far more than 1% of their time on the job in this capacity. So if you have a laboratory staff and animal staff specifically, your training percentage should fall anywhere between 3 to 5%. And that 3 to 5% is going to give you roughly about a week of training per year. And that is going to allow for organizations to see the benefit of training, meaning the repeated injects of their staff. I know out there are folks that are saying there's no way we can take care of the animals and do what we're doing and do how we're doing if we're going to spend a lot of time training. We can't do that. Our job is 365 days of the year, 24 hours a day. And I understand that, and I get that. But that doesn't minimize your risk. In fact, that increases your risk. And that excuse that you have is a reason that should guide, or that should promote more training rather than push training away. So that reason that's out there, that we work constantly, that we're always working, that we have no time, that type of situation increases your overall risk at work. And that excuse right there is the reason to get training rather than run away from that overall training aspect. And don't get me wrong, I have to say, majority of the training that I've seen out there is very boring and puts a lot of people to sleep. And the reality of the situation is training has to be hands-on, engaging, and something that makes folks want to be there rather than something that makes folks want to go to sleep or even want to get back to their job. So the reality is that trainers have to know how much time they're working with so that they have the capability of putting in the learning objectives that they need to accomplish. Now, real quick, I put this in the slide set for trainers so that if you're writing learning objectives, you're writing measurable learning objectives. If you look at these verbs, these verbs are measurable, and quite honestly, these are the verbs that you want to use when you write your test. So for example, if I'm creating a test for a novice, I'm going to ask a novice to describe or to define, to cite, to recall, to recognize, to select. These are verbs that will demonstrate a general awareness about a particular topic. If I'm going to test a practitioner, then I'm going to use distinguish, differentiate, describe, demonstrate. These are verbs that we would use for practitioners where they would have the opportunity to show or behave in a particular manner. And when we get to application or expert aspects, and I'm so sorry, I have to tell you right now, I'm looking at this slide and it is an error, and I apologize. If you look at these comprehension verbs and you look at these application verbs, they're flip-flopped. The application verbs are actually the practitioner verbs. So the ability to apply, calculate, complete, demonstrate, those are practitioner because they're focused on skill. If you look at comprehension, that's expert. And so these are folks that can distinguish, estimate, explain, because it takes not only experience, but it takes time to accrue those abilities to do that. So again, I apologize for the error on the slide. This is a big error, and I do apologize. I'll make kind of a little note on this as well here. But what I'd like to again reference is that this is here, and then this is up here as well. So again, forgive me for making that mistake, and I apologize for not catching that sooner. Now, last but not least, before we open it up for questions, and I really do hope that folks stick around for questions and have some questions. But last but not least, we have to, as trainers, be able to evaluate our programs, because when you're training, you tend to have this emotional connection, and everybody's they're not gonna believe what you think or what you feel about your overall training program. So you've got to have the results demonstrate your work for you. So you're going to want to evaluate the participant, and that's not what the participant likes or thinks. That's where the participant's cognitive and practical abilities are during the beginning of the class. Then you measure the process, which is a day-to-day evaluation that lets you know how the students feel or how the participants feel about your course, and also lets you know any knowledge and practical experience has been gained as a result of the course. You grade your instructors so that your instructors know how successful they are, not only in how well they're received by the students, but also how well the students received information from them. And then last but not least, your post-assessment of the participant will demonstrate benefit gained. So as a trainer, if you're not evaluating your programs and you're just assuming that your programs are working well, please think again. Always evaluate your program so that when the time comes to fight for your program or suggest that you do more of your program, the people that you're fighting for, the voices that you're showing and giving a justification from, it's not just you. It's, hey, look at the hundreds of people I've trained, look at what they're saying, and these are the people that are going to be let down if we do not train anymore or we don't have this training program, okay? Now, the last statement is kind of a neat one. Working at Emory and owning a business has really opened my eyes. There's no doubt in my mind that I would have loved to have had each and every one of you in this session right now with me so that I could see your faces. I could see the strange looks that you would have. I could see the things that you would disagree with, the things that you would agree with. I could have an open and dialogue. I could use you in front of the class as an example. But the reality is this, that way of delivering a talk is, in my opinion, the best way, but it is not the most practical, and these days it's going to become much fewer in between because of travel budgets and all sorts of things. The reality is that I would always prefer a training to occur in person, especially if it's a skill-based training. However, there are some really, really cool programs out there like YouTube or other programs out there that will teach you a skill with a video, a particular video, interactive type piece. So through your computer, you can learn a particular skill. I know it's weird, but you know, we as human beings, if we watch a particular behavior, we can absorb it, we can learn it, we can learn new things. And the reality is that through computers, or what we would call, e-learning systems, online learning systems, we can teach particular behaviors, especially if we're very specific about what we're looking for. We can teach SOPs by showing them over and over and over again, then simply asking people to demonstrate them upon completion of the training. But the last one is the most intriguing. The last one is a symbol of GoToTraining or GoToMeeting, but we have a GoToTraining platform or any platform like the one we're using right now. This is a phenomenal opportunity, an opportunity to go through a training program and have a live instructor be able to answer questions, be able to facilitate discussion, be able to interact with the audience, allowing all of you to be where you are right now, whether it be in the office, at home, some of you may be in cars. You could be all over the world, literally, and you still have access to a trainer. It's kind of the middle ground between an online course and an in-person course. And I think these courses are going to be offered a lot more. I know we're offering them a lot more. I think a lot of folks are offering them a lot more, and they're different than webinars. Webinars don't allow for a lot of interaction. These platforms that are now coming out allow for a significant amount of interaction between the instructor and the participant. And I think that you're going to see a lot more of those. And I would strongly suggest at Emory, for example, we are doing these training programs now using this platform for our own internal audience. So when we do bloodborne pathogen training or any type of in-person training, we now are having facilitators allow people to train remotely so that we can get larger audiences, saving a lot of resources, but delivering a high-quality product at the same time. So I guess at this time, I'm looking for any questions that you may have, and I guess Tracy, you're going to facilitate that. But I appreciate all of you attending and taking the time to be here in Atlanta with me. And should you have any questions that are not answered in this presentation, I have both my web address and my personal email and cell phone number. Please feel free to give me a call. I'd be very, very happy to answer any questions you may have. Tracy? Maybe not Tracy. I'm going to see, let's see if I can do the Q&A session. So far, I only have one question, folks, from, it looks like Russell. It says, Sean, how do you suggest dealing with single individuals with persistent infractions? That's a $1 million question, Russell. Very good. Okay, so the first question, or the first thing that we've got to do is we've got to give them expectations. And I want to kind of cruise through this because expectations in the laboratory environment are very, very important. So we call these behavioral expectations. I'm going to list the top 5. And get ready, guys. If you're getting ready to leave, don't leave on this one because the top 5 I think are very, very important. The first expectation is we will follow all SOPs to the best of our ability. The second behavioral expectation is we will ensure others around us follow SOPs to the best of their ability. Now, those 2 expectations come from a lesson learned with Beth Griffin and the ocular exposure to herpes B virus. She got something in her eye. She knew the SOP was to flush her eye out. The colleague that she was with also knew that she had gotten something in her eye and had a chance to really motivate Beth to go flush her eye out. Nothing like that happened. And the reality is that policies and procedures cannot be enforced by biosafety officers because we're not going to ever have the resources to do that. So it has to be self-governed. So we have to not only make sure we agree to follow SOPs, but that others around us follow the SOPs as well. The third behavioral expectation is that we're going to report any laboratory accidents or incidents, allowing for the organization to improve as a result of the lesson that we may have learned. Remember, if we don't report an accident or incident, then we don't have an opportunity to improve, and the lesson for the organization is lost. The fourth expectation is I will report any symptoms which match the clinical presentation of the pathogens that I'm working with. This helps with medical surveillance and ensuring that if people do get sick as a result of laboratory-acquired illness, they get treatment and it is discovered immediately. The last behavioral expectation is I will report any new medical conditions that may include medications that cause seizures, pregnancy, diabetes, chronic asthmatic conditions where I take steroids and that may weaken my immune system. These things people like to claim are protected under HIPAA, but the reality is if you're working in a lab with infectious pathogens and you have any one of these conditions, you better report them so that we have an opportunity to protect them. I go back to the laboratory accidents and incidents and the death at UCLA and how that event had occurred and how it had occurred prior and nobody did anything about it and it led to a death of a young lady in a chem lab. If you look at the lack of medical surveillance at Boston University with the pneumonic tularemia cases, where 3 people got sick while working with a contaminated strain of tularemia, and last but not least, the death that occurred at University of Chicago in Illinois from an individual who was working with Yersinia pestis, died from pneumonic plague as a result of a compromised immune system and an iron disorder. So to answer your question again, and I apologize for being so long-winded, we have to first make sure, Russell, that the individual has expectations to live up to. After we have those expectations have been clear, we then will meet with the individual when there's an infraction. If that infraction occurs, we then ask them, well, do you understand the risk? Do you understand the benefit? Do you have the resources? Do you have the skills? Demonstrate them. Do you have the self-efficacy and belief? So we make sure that they have the 5 things they need to behave. And then if they do it again, we make sure that they are escorted in the lab by somebody who we would call is in green standing. Now, what does that mean? Escorted. Adults hate, and they absolutely do not like being escorted by other individuals. But the reality is that anytime we punish someone for not following the rules, we're removing them from ever gaining benefit or ever having to practice this. So I'll give you a classic example. When I was a kid, I stunk at doing dishes. And I did it on purpose. And one night my mom really saw this and she talked to my dad. My dad walked off and I thought I was successful in this. He came back about a half an hour later and he thanked me for my efforts with the dishes. And then he said, son, as you know, I'm not very happy. I said, yeah, I played along. He says, so I went around to all the neighbors, and tonight you will be doing all of their dishes, only to come back here and do these dishes again, because I want to make sure that you're successful at doing these dishes. What my dad did in that moment was teach me that the only way I'm ever going to get out of doing something is if I do it right, number one, but he also allowed me to practice the skills that I wasn't so good at. So punishing people by removing them from the lab is not the solution. If they are messing up, you make them do the behavior over and over and over and over and over again until they get it right. And that is how I deal with somebody who was persistently messing up. I hope that answers your question. The next question comes from, gosh, I can't say your name, Michaela from Chile. So this is really cool. Very, very cool. See if you like. Let's see here. It says e-learning. If you like to listen to us in 2 hours, great. I don't know if that's a question. Let's see here. Thank you very much for responding. I'm having a little difficulty here. Any other questions out there? I don't see any other questions out there. I'm wondering. Hold on one sec. And I don't see anybody else. Come on, there has to be some more. You got to give me a little bit more. All right, let's see here. Okay. Well, I guess that being said, I know there's still quite a bit of folks online. Again, if you have any questions that you have for me, my email, my phone number is available. I appreciate all the kind compliments that you guys are sending. Thank you very, very much for sending those. Stephanie, I got it. I appreciate that. Oh, it looks like we do have a question. If you have a PI who has a bad lab practice, how do you handle that bad lab practice? I'd focus on the PI primarily, and I know this is going to sound calloused, but this is what I do. Cowboys are cowboys, and sometimes cowboys don't realize that it's not just about them. It's about the agency. It's about the organization. It's about the research. It's about their family. It's about everything outside of them. And so I would, again, with those, remember we talked earlier about the 5 things that people need to behave. I would, again, have a discussion of the risk, but from a very unique perspective. I would ask them what the risk is, and they're going to sit back and say, I know the risk. I said, no, I want to know what the risk is to the organization, to the research agenda, to the animals, to our reputation. Should what you're doing have a profound impact on something? And get them to think outside of themselves. And as you get them to think outside of themselves, they may begin to see the need and the validity behind changing a particular behavior. I have to tell you, as a trainer, the hardest group of people to change are experts. The hardest people to train are practitioners. And so when you look at changing a PI that has years and years and years and years of experience, I by no means think that's a simple process, but I will tell you this. Get them thinking about the risk outside of themselves. It's not just about them. It's about their other lab folks. It's about the research agenda. It's about the animals. It's about the reputation of the organization. And get them thinking about a common cause as to why we're behaving in a consistent manner rather than the way they're choosing to behave. Any other questions out there or comments? It says, any suggestions, any ideas or suggestions about changing your overall health and safety culture in a positive and fun way with activities? Absolutely. Shelley, thank you for asking that. And from the National Research Council, I do a lot of training in safety culture. I was just actually in New Zealand, did a keynote address for New Zealand out there in safety culture, and we did actually a lunch break series recently on safety culture. I think the biggest influencer of safety culture, in my opinion, is this concept of intrinsic safety. And what I mean by that is, if you were to view safety as a service industry, we are going to serve folks. We're not going to police folks. We're going to serve them. And what I mean by serving is we're not going to do safety for them and to them. We're going to do that with them and by them, so that by the time we leave them, we've increased their capacity and their capability to actually do safety. And so the reality is a concept of intrinsic safety means that we're going to view every single person as creative, capable, and complete enough to develop safety solutions for them. And as a safety officer, we're going to review those safety solutions. We're not going to do safety for them. We're not going to do it to them. We're going to do it with them in the trenches, so that by the time we leave, safety is something that they own and safety is something that they're comfortable with. The problem with safety today is a lot of safety officers are separating themselves from the science, and a lot of scientists are separating themselves from safety. And when you do that, the lenses that those individuals look through become a lot more distant because of that siloed effect. We have to stop looking through different lenses, and the only way we can do that is if scientists start working with safety professionals and safety professionals start working with scientists, and we get them engaged actively in safety with an intrinsic model. And I'd be very happy to elaborate more on that later with you if you would like. Any other questions or comments, folks? These questions are great. I appreciate them. Any other questions? Going once. Going twice. Okay, I think we are about ready to end the session. Again, thank you all very, very much, and so long from Atlanta. I think we're good. Thank you very much.